Let's cultivate our motivation. And with a very deep appreciation that, almost like a miracle, we have created the causes to be interested in the Dharma this life, and to be able to meet and learn and contemplate and meditate on the Dharma. Because when we look around, we're surrounded by living beings, very kind and lovely living beings who want to be happy and don't want to suffer. And yet they don't know how to bring about the happiness they want or eliminate the suffering they don't want. And they have absolutely no interest at all in the Dharma. And so that's a really sad situation. So our having interest and also having the Dharma available to us is something rare and precious and not to be taken for granted. And it's certainly no reason to be haughty, thinking we're better than the people who have no interest in the Dharma, but rather seeing their kindness, seeing how they're just like us, to have a wish to benefit them in some way or another, however we can this life, and then hopefully to benefit them even more in future lives, perhaps when their karma has changed. And to lead them on the path. But to lead them on the path, we have to actualize the path ourselves. And so we have to have the aspiration for full enlightenment and then create the causes for it, especially through generating the wisdom that understands the ultimate nature. And so in that way, we'll be able to make our lives meaningful and repay the kindness of others. So this is true, isn't it? We know many people who we're quite fond of, who want to be happy and don't want to suffer. And we'd love to be able to share the Dharma with them, and they're not interested. I think we all have people like that in our lives, don't we? All of us. Yeah? And we can't force people. And we even find sometimes people coming here to the Abbey have some level of interest, but then it stops. It's, it's not a deep level of interest. And so, we have to be able to benefit people as much as we can within this lifetime, as much as from our side we're capable, and as much as from their side their karma and their mental state will let us benefit them. Yeah? And sometimes it's, when it's like we really want to benefit and they're just not receptive, then sometimes we can get really frustrated. We can get angry. You get angry at people you want to benefit? Why don't they understand? Here's the Dharma. It's so precious. Why are they sticking their hole in the sand, So we can get frustrated, we can get angry, we can become disillusioned, we can throw our arms up in despair, But whenever that kind of reaction comes, there's ego involved, isn't there? Yeah? And so we have to come back to, oh, but look at this person's state of mind and how their afflictions are limiting them and how they can't even understand that their afflictions are limiting them. And then to think, and sometimes that may also apply to me too. That my afflictions are limiting me and I think I'm doing the right thing, but other people are looking at me thinking, boy, she's, completely out of touch with what's going on. Okay? And so, then to really appreciate when our mind is clear and to be able to practice at those times and, correct our mind if we start getting frustrated with the people that we want to benefit. Okay? And turn that into a compassionate attitude that has a lot of patience. Okay? And then also think of how the bodhisattvas are trying to help us and how we tune them out and have some sympathy for these bodhisattvas who are trying to help us and we don't follow instructions. And then to make a very sincere determination ourselves to really try and keep our eyes open and try and be receptive vessels and try and take in the help that others are giving us so that we can progress along the path. Okay? Okay, so we've been talking about the 5 powers, right? How to practice them in our life and then also at the time of death. And so in terms of at the time of death, we talked about the virtuous seed, that power of making generosity with our things and giving things away so that we're not impeded by attachment to possessions or status or friends or relatives, things like that. And then the power of aspirations, or in this text it has the power of motivation second, but they're quite similar. In other words, generating a motivation not to be separated from the 3 jewels and the thought training teachings, and to do the 7 limb prayer and confess our negativities and really have a strong aspiration, motivation, not to let our mind be separated from the thought training teachings as we die when we're in the intermediate state or at the time of rebirth. Okay? And the best way to fulfill that aspiration is not to let our mind be separate from the thought training teachings right now. Okay? That's the way to fulfill that aspiration. It's not enough just to aspire, at death, intermediate stage, rebirth. Somehow, by magic, may I not be separated from these precious teachings. And yet, when we're alive, when our mind is the most alert, then we let our mind be quite separate from the teachings. So that's counterindicative. Right? Okay, and then the third one, the power of destruction. So especially to destroy the self-centered thought and the self-grasping ignorance, not to let them, run the show. And this can be very hard because sometimes we're not even aware when they manifest in our mind. When there's self-grasping ignorance, we're not even often aware that we're grasping at the self. We know all the words and we can give the definition and everything like that of self-grasping ignorance, its antidote and blah blah, but when it's there in our mind, we're space cases, we don't even realize it's present. And the self-centered thought too is so sneaky that sometimes when the self-centered thought is running rampant in our mind, we think we're making wise decisions. Yeah, I mean, that's how sneaky it is, that it just kind of comes in and, kind of with its own kind of logic, blah, blah, takes control, and off we go, and we don't even see it. So, if we practice, we have to practice this life to try and be more mindful, more aware while we're alive. And if we do that, then we'll be able to fulfill the aspiration at the time of death and in the intermediate stage and at the time of rebirth. Yeah, I was thinking, as I was getting ready for the teachings, like, imagining dying, and then there's this feeling of, I'm going to cease to exist. Yeah? And you think, I'm dying, I should meditate on emptiness. But, if I meditate on emptiness, I'm going to cease to exist. If I go into a mind that's not grasping, that is without the appearance of a conventional object, that doesn't have a sensation of me as the subject perceiving an object, if I don't have that, then I'm going to disappear into nothingness. And there's this incredible terror of, I'm going to disappear into nothingness. So I've got to have a me perceiving an object, and they both got to be there. And then, once I have that, then I can meditate on emptiness. Yeah? In other words, as long as I keep the self-grasping nice and secure, then I'll do my own version of a meditation on emptiness, which is ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah? And so then to be able to look and say, wow, this fear of that the I is going to totally disappear. Where is this coming from? And what is the reason this is coming in my mind? And why does this mind think that having a truly existent I is good and beneficial in the path to happiness? And then there's this thing well, at least I exist, because if I don't exist, then there's no path to happiness for me. Yeah? And so you can see how our mind goes between eternalism, holding this absolutist view of a self, and nihilism of there's no self at all, and that's terrifying. Yeah? And then to, even find the middle way or imagine a middle way through that, where things conventionally exist, but without inherently existing. Yeah? And so being able to let go of grasping at a truly existent I without letting go of conventional existence. Yeah? In other words, finding the correct view of emptiness. So we can get some feeling there about how hard that can be, and how just this thing is, there's got to be a me. Yeah. And once there's a me, okay, then I can meditate on emptiness. But it's ridiculous, isn't it? Okay. So working on this during our life, so when the time of death comes, we can relax into it. And like I told you last week, Lama Yeshe said about this point, the power of destruction, to really think the body and mind don't need to be grasped at. The self doesn't need to be grasped at. There's no need to grasp. Yeah? And then to trust that. But that's hard for us. That's hard. Okay, and so that's why we need a very strong accumulation of merit and a very close relationship in our heart with the three jewels and with our spiritual mentor, so that we feel that support, and then that helps our mind relax into letting, into stopping to grasp. Okay, then the fourth power, our author says, he has it as the power of aspiration. We should make strong aspirations never to be separated from the awakening mind under any circumstances, nor to be dominated by the misconception of self or the disturbing emotions. Okay, so make a very strong aspiration never to be separated from the bodhicitta in any circumstances. So no matter how other people treat us, if they call us names, if they tell us our spiritual path is rubbish and we're going to hell, if they, who cares how they treat us, to never give up the bodhicitta, okay? And to not let ourselves be dominated by this grasping of self. And so to really keep this is when we talk about introspective alertness, it's the monitoring mind. It's like your internal policeman, who's searching for the self-centered mind and the self-grasping ignorance. Okay, so that they don't take over. Like I was saying, Lama, she said had the second and fourth one interchanged. So he says the fourth one is motivation. And so here it's a strong intention to practice bodhicitta at death, intermediate stage, and rebirth. Okay, so to make a firm intention like this, and if we do, then spontaneously in death, in the intermediate stage, and rebirth, the bodhicitta will arise, even though usually at those times there's not much opportunity or freedom, because the mind is so overwhelmed by what is happening to us at that very moment. Okay, so to have a very strong aspiration and motivation to generate the two bodhicittas, ultimate bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta. Okay, so again, just having this motivation isn't sufficient. We've got to do something to make it come about. And so we have to practice in our life right now, always bringing ourselves back to these two bodhicittas and making it so habitual, because that's the way that this motivation, aspiration is actually going to happen. Yeah. So even, to train the mind that as we're falling asleep, if our mind starts to wander to strange things as we're falling asleep, bring it back to bodhicitta, or bring it back to refuge in the three jewels. Imagine the Buddha, imagine Tara. Okay, same thing when we wake up, train the mind so it, immediately goes to something in the Dharma. To always try and keep our mind in the Dharma as much as possible. And that's one of the benefits of being in a place like this, is that just by the daily schedule, we get continual reminders of the Dharma. Yeah, again and again and again. It's just part of our daily life. And so that's very, very helpful to us, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, and then the fifth power is a familiarity or acquaintance. And so here, Nam Kapel says, this concerns physical actions. Okay, so here he's going to tell us about the physical action of how to position our body when we die. Okay, so the physical actions such as lying on your right side, your right cheek resting in your right hand, okay, your head pointing towards the north, the top of your head pointing towards the north, with your ring finger stopping the breath in your right nostril. Okay, and then your left hand is on your left thigh, and breathing only through your left nostril, transfer your consciousness. In this context, the great Geshe Chekawa said, there are many marvelous instructions on the transference of consciousness, but this is the most wonderful of them all. Okay, so this is the lion position. Yeah, you may have seen the statues of the Buddha when he attained parinirvana, lying on his right side and, with his hand like this. Usually they have his hand propping his head up in the statues, yeah. But some of the times you see it actually as it is like this. Okay, so that's a very good way to position the body if we can to die. Lots of times in hospital beds they have you lying on your back, but if you can have somebody put you on your right side, that's very good. I had the great privilege actually of being there when this one monk died. This was many, many years ago, and I was at Tushita in McLeodganj. I was doing some work for one of my teachers there. And on the way to Tushita, there were a row of kind of mud buildings where some very old monks lived. And one day there was a lot of flurry around those buildings when I walked past, because one of the old monks had fallen. And so I went up to Tushita, and there was one woman there who was a nurse, and then another Tibetan nun, and they came down, to try and take care of him. And it was very interesting because all the Tibetans, there were a few other Tibetan monks who lived in that series of mud and brick houses. And they were very calm, even though their friend had just slipped and was clearly something was wrong. The Westerners were all freaked out. Oh, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. So they got in the Jeep and ran down the hill to the hospital and picked up the doctor at Dalek Hospital and drove him up there and rushed him to this monk, and everybody's the Westerners are all in a frenzy. We've got to save him. And the doctor looks at him and says he's going to die. And meanwhile, the Tibetan monks knew that beforehand, and they were completely cool with it. And they had, already kind of started the preparations for the pujas that they were going to be doing. So this monk didn't die immediately. He was hemorrhaging inside. And so the nurse and then Venerable Senla was there. They were taking care of him inside his room. So they put plastic under him because he was hemorrhaging internally and it was coming out. And then my job was to take the plastic and throw the innards over the side of the hill. And then, they'd put the plastic back underneath him. So this went on for some while, and then the monks had done the preparation for the puja according to, he was a practitioner of Vajrayogini, so they were going to do Vajrayogini puja. And I went in there with them to do the puja. And we did it, it lasted a few hours, and when we came back, the nurse and Venerable Senla said he had passed away. And one of the monks, Geshe Jumpa Wangdu, he went in and he came into the room to check the signs and everything. And he came out and he was smiling and very happy. His friend had just died. But he accepted death, smiling. Very good signs. He had dined really, really well. The heat left, the feet first, and, all these different signs. And then later I talked to Venerable Senla and the Western nurse about it. And the monk, while he was, because they were the ones in the room taking care of him, while he was hemorrhaging on the inside, he was aware that he was going to die. And so he had them to put his body, to sit it up, so he could meditate like that. And there was no strength left in his body. He couldn't sit up and meditate. Yeah, that was kind of the ideal thing, to be able to sit up and meditate. But hemorrhaging inside, there was no such strength. So they, he said, okay, let's forget that. And then he had them lay him on his right side like this, yeah, and as described in the thought training text. But somehow his body was too weak even to sustain that position, and so finally he had them lay his body in the position of Vajrayogini. You know, even though Vajrayogini standing up, he was doing it lying down, the positions in the hands. And he died like that with his chugu, you know, over him. And you know, when Geshe Chenpa Wangdu had gone in and saw that and saw the different signs, he was so happy because the monk had been able to really practice well and direct his mind at that time. And he was even the one telling the nurse and Venerable Senla who were caring for him how to put his body. Yeah, it was really rather amazing to see that. So I always feel quite indebted to that monk. I learned very much by being there and being able to witness that. Okay, so you know, this whole way of putting the body when you're dying, yeah. Okay, so not only do you want to put your body in a certain thing, but again, you could see with this monk, you know, if your body's not going the way you want it to, you know, do what works. Yeah, he wasn't sitting there saying, okay, I got to sit up at any cost, hold me up, you know. It's just, okay, it's not working, let's try something else. Okay, until finally he got the proper position. Okay, but then also, as we're dying, to be able to practice the taking and giving meditation. Okay, to really remember that and practice that as we're dying. Yeah, so that the bodhicitta and love and compassion are very strong in our minds. And also meditating on emptiness at the time that we're dying is also very, very helpful, because it's helpful to remember that things are empty of false appearances. They're empty of, you know, being external, real, objective entities. And this is quite important because as we die, depending upon what karma is ripening, sometimes there can be very fearful visions at the time of death. Kind of like, you know, when you fall asleep, you can have all sorts of weird things, and when you dream, you can have nightmares, and none of it's real, but when you're dreaming, you know, you're scared in the dream because it seems so real. So in the same way, if we're dying or in the intermediate state or whatever, you know, you have a fearful appearance to the mind. The mind doesn't realize it's an appearance, it thinks it's an objective thing, and then starts freaking out. Okay, and so you don't want that to happen when you're dying or when you're in the intermediate stage, because that's what, you know, really throws you into a bad rebirth. And so to remember emptiness at that time and not to grasp at these things as real and to think they're just appearances, you know, appearances that arise due to causes and conditions. There's nothing objective there to be afraid of or to react to or to push against or to cling to. Okay? And so really remembering emptiness at that time is very, very important, very, very useful. Okay? And so of course to do that during death and bardo and intermediate state, you know, which is more confusing because the mind is subtler, yeah, then we've got to practice now when our, you know, we have some ability to practice. And so when things or appearances come in our mind and we're very afraid, yeah, to be able to think, you know, train our mind at that moment of, this is just an appearance. That's all. It's just an appearance. It's not an objective reality. Yeah? Or same way, you know, when we get criticized, or someone looks like they're going to hit us or something like that, how our mind just thinks, enemy, and then just shifting it. This is just an appearance. It's only an appearance. There's nothing real there. Okay? It's just an appearance due to causes and conditions. Okay? And so training our mind in this way, when we receive criticism, whenever our mind is hallucinating an enemy, okay? Yeah? Whenever our mind is getting so tight that we can't stand something. You know how sometimes our mind just gets like crazy, you know? Like so tight. I remember one time sitting somewhere and meditating, you know, in a meditation hall, and I got so angry that I felt like I cannot sit here one moment longer. I cannot tolerate sitting in this room. Of course, there's nothing going on. There's nothing going on. Everybody's sitting meditating. Calm, it's a safe place. Nothing is going on. But my mind goes into this thing of, I'm so angry and furious, I cannot sit here one more split second. I have to get up and leave. I can't stand it. Have you ever had that happen? Yeah? And you open your eyes and like there is nothing happening in the environment. Zero. And yet the mind is hallucinating this incredible drama that we can't endure. Yeah? And so if you think at that point the mind is so berserky and out of control that we can't sit there one more minute, what are we going to do when we're dying? Or when visions happen during the intermediate state? My goodness, you know, we have to learn to work with this kind of mind so that when it happens, we can learn to relax our own mind. Yeah? And just relax it and let it go. And, yeah? Have you ever had a really bad fever and your mind's kind of hallucinating? Well, we've had other circumstances when our mind is hallucinated. Yeah? Okay, and when you're having a bad trip, you have the awareness to say, oh, this is a bad trip, and to pull yourself out of it, or is the mind completely involved in the hallucination? Yeah? Remember I told you we would all go to Lama Yeshe in Kopan, you know? Hi, Lama. You know? We all just come up from Freak Street. That's where they sold the dope. And, you know, Lama, you know, what do you think about drugs and meditation, Lama? Don't you think they go very well together? You know, relax your mind, loosen your mind, see all these far-out stuff. You know, what do you think, Lama? You know, should we smoke a joint and meditate? And Lama was so compassionate. You know, he didn't kick us out. He looked at us and he said, you're already hallucinating, dear. Yeah, you don't need to take any drugs. You're already hallucinating. Yeah, you're grasping at true existence. You're hallucinating. Yeah. And so to be able to recognize our hallucinations and, you know, settle the mind down. And not only our fearful hallucinations, but our hallucinations of attachment. You know, our hallucinations when we meet somebody and like, this person definitely is going to bring me lasting happiness. Definitely above all else. All the other ones I had bad judgment. But this one definitely from their own side is going to bring me everlasting happiness. I'm going to give everything up for the love of my life. You know, the mind can hallucinate that, can't it? Haven't you ever hallucinated that? Yeah? And what happened? If it were true, we would still all be with that person right now, wouldn't we be? Yeah, but we're not still with that person, are we? Yeah, why? Because it was a hallucination. Yeah? And so to be able to identify hallucinations and, you know, pull the mind out of them and, you know, back to reality. which is that there's nothing inherently existent to grasp onto. Okay? Yeah. And so Lama also said, and this was just his beautiful personal instructions when he was teaching this. He said, when you die, don't have any expectation. He said, just relax your mind and don't worry, and say to yourself, okay, when the situation comes, I die. Yeah? When the situation comes, I die. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to worry. I don't need to cling or grasp. Yeah? So to really set that intention and have that kind of awareness, and then not worry about what's going to happen to our body after we die, what's going to happen to our friends. They'll all live very well without us. What's going to happen to our possessions, what's going to happen to our special things that, nobody else is going to appreciate. All the little things, souvenirs that we save, and, that people are going to go through and go, what kind of junk is this? Yeah? Kind of like when other people find your stuff in the barn. Or under your bed when we're changing rooms and other people have to go look at your stuff. Why are they saving all this junk? Yeah? And then there we are dying going, oh no, they're going to look through my stuff and call it junk. Oh, but it's my treasured this and that and the other thing, and then they're going to think poorly of me after I die, that all I did was collect junk, and what's going to happen to my reputation? It's very possible that this happens, isn't it? Because look the way we react when we're alive. When somebody says, what's all this junk you have in the barn? And we go, what junk? Those are my childhood photographs. Those are my souvenirs. You know what I used to save? I don't have it anymore. But when I was in high school, I had a scrapbook. Somebody gave me this scrapbook. And it was a scrapbook for every guy you dated, For his picture and his CV and the napkins, from wherever he took you to eat, and the ticket stubs for whatever movies he took you to, and, any kind of pictures and things. So I had a whole scrapbook, started with Harry Addington, this whole thing, which was important only to me, which I threw out before I ordained. I know you're really sorry because you wish you could look at it now. That's what she was like as a teenager. Okay. But it's this kind of stuff, you can get so attached to these things, and, oh, they're going to throw it out, or they're going to find it, what are they going to think of me? Who cares, Whoever we are this life won't even exist at that time. So why care about the reputation? Okay, so just to relax, practice taking and giving, meditate on emptiness. Yeah, take refuge. Bottom line, if you can't do anything else, take refuge in the 3 jewels. And really make strong prayers to not be separated from the 3 jewels. But if you think, okay, I take refuge in the 3 jewels, it sounds easy, refuge, take refuge in the 3 jewels, refuge. But if you think about the meaning of that, if you really take refuge in the Dharma, what does that mean? Yeah. If the mind is really taking refuge in the Dharma, what are you going to be thinking about? What is the Dharma, the Dharma jewel? Yeah. The realization of the emptiness that's the true path, and the true cessations it brings about. So if you're really meditating on Dharma, what are you going to, taking refuge in the Dharma, what are you going to reflect on? Emptiness. Okay? Or if not emptiness, taking and giving. Okay, really think what's, it's not just praying, I take refuge in the Dharma. But if we really take refuge in the Dharma, then we're going to put the Dharma in our mind at that moment. Okay? And so this is, we have to train our mind in all of this while we're alive. And of course, if a Dharma friend is around when we're dying, that's very, very helpful. And if you're ever around a Dharma person who's dying, remind them of this. Remind them to take refuge, to meditate on Tonglen, to meditate on emptiness. Okay? Yeah, don't just sit there and cry. That's not at all helpful to somebody who's dying. Okay? But, show them a picture of their spiritual master, a picture of the Buddha, recite mantras, recite some of the like the foundation of all good qualities or the various Lamrim prayers. Give them instructions on what to think about, what to meditate on. Yeah, that's the best way to help somebody. Yeah, and if the person is not a Dharma person, then speak in the language of whatever religion they believe in. Yeah, and if they don't believe in any religion, love and compassion. As His Holiness says, my religion is kindness, and that's the best thing to remind anybody of when they're dying. Okay, and so, but we don't know what circumstances we're going to die in, do we? Yeah, sure, it would be great, His Holiness Dalai Lama is there when I'm dying. Great, I can visualize that. The chances of it happening? Okay? So we have to be able to be prepared on how to guide our own mind. Yeah? Okay. When this one young man that I was helping in Singapore, he sat us down. He was dying. I think I've told you about him before, and he planned the whole memorial service one Sunday afternoon with all of us there. And he said, because he was with his sister, and he said, if anybody's going to cry, please leave the room. I don't want you in the room when I'm dying. He said that to him. So that was good. Okay, so that's the 5 powers. So any questions on these?
What do you do when you die in an accident?
Okay, what if you're going to die in an accident? Then you have to think really quickly. Yeah, you have to take refuge quickly, do taking and giving, meditate on emptiness. Yeah, you have to do these things very, very quickly. Huh? Huh? Mm-hmm.
I think this kind of relates to this, because if you were dying and you wanted to bring mind your teacher, but you were away from your teacher, I was just wondering how you keep in mind your teacher.
How you keep
in mind your teachers and keep it alive.
Okay. Okay, so what about when you're away from your teacher, but you want to be able to remember your teacher when you're dying? So how do you keep that feeling of closeness with your teacher alive, even when you're alive? That's the practice of Guru Yoga. Okay? So in other words, seeing the deity and your teacher, that their nature is the same. Yeah. So when you visualize the deity, thinking that it's your guru, or if you're doing, visualizing Lama Tsongkhapa, think that's, inseparable from my spiritual mentor. And so, daily doing this kind of practice, so that when you're in your meditation and you're visualizing either Chenrezig or Buddha or whoever it is, you're thinking their nature and the nature of my spiritual mentor is exactly the same. Yeah. And then, not just that, you know, okay, Buddha's out there and has the same nature of my spiritual mentor. But remember, at the end of the practice, Buddha dissolves into us, Chenrezig dissolves into us, Tara dissolves into us. And then we think that our nature and the deity's nature become inseparable. And so at that point, you really feel, you know, okay, what's the, you know, there's no inherently existent teacher, you know. Spiritual mentor is labeled on qualities. What qualities? Wisdom, compassion, kindness, you know. So then when you imagine the deity who is the same nature as the teacher dissolving into you and becoming inseparable with your own mind, then you think your mind becomes those qualities. Okay? Yeah, so you do the Guru Yoga practice on a daily basis, and it really keeps the feeling of closeness to your spiritual mentor quite alive in your mind. Yeah. Yeah. And that's important because, you know, sometimes we are separated from our spiritual mentor. Sometimes our spiritual mentor dies before us. You know, if we're just focusing on the spiritual mentor being that person in a body, then when they die, we feel like lost children. But if we're really practicing Guru Yoga, then we don't have that feeling of being lost.
Okay. Question online. Why the right side?
Okay, why lie on the right side? They sometimes say that I think the right side has more to do with anger, the left side has more to do with attachment. Yeah, so when you're blocking the nostril, you're blocking some of the air, the winds, the energies that carry the disturbing energy with you, you know. So it's helpful in that way. Yeah?
You mentioned that the bardo state is similar to a dream in terms of the lack of lucid, the lack of control. How much more subtle is it from the dream to
Okay, so said that the bardo was like a dream in the same as kind of lacking control and things appearing very real and grasping at them. So how much more subtle is the bardo than a dream? Well, I can't tell you percentage-wise. Yeah. It's quite interesting. In the Tantra, they make analogies between death, bardo, and rebirth, and deep sleep, dream, and waking up. Okay? So dying is, or put it this way, falling asleep is analogous to dying. So the mind is not as subtle when we're in deep sleep as it is when we're dying, but it's definitely more subtle than when our sense consciousnesses are functioning. And then from sleep we pass into dream, which is a little bit grosser, but it's certainly more subtle than our waking mind, and that's analogous to the bardo. But the bardo is going to be more subtle than a dream, yeah, because you've already left the body, yeah. And then waking up in our ordinary state is analogous to taking rebirth, yeah. And so that's when the senses become more functioning more, the coarse levels of consciousness return. Okay. So there's a practice in Tantra where you meditate on these analogies, and then you try and take death into the path to the Dharmakaya, the truth body, rebirth into the path to the resource body, or Sambhogakaya, and rebirth into the rebirth into the path to the emanation body, or Nirmanakaya. Yeah, and then you have the sleeping, dreaming, awaking that are analogous to that. You think that way also when you're sleeping, dreaming, and waking up. Yeah, Lama Yeshe used to have to rest a lot. He had a hole in his heart, and the doctors were quite surprised that he was able to stay alive as long as he did. So he needed to rest a lot and sleep a lot, and I'm sure when he was doing that, he was doing this kind of meditation of, you know, deep sleep and dreaming and then waking up. Anything else? Should we go on? Okay. Okay. So now we're at another section, which is called the measure of having trained the mind. So if you remember before, there was a broad heading that said instructions concerning the 5 precepts that are factors of the training. And the first one was transforming adverse circumstances into the path, and we finished that. The second one was take the integrated path of a single lifetime. And that was talking about the 5 powers. Now we're at the third of that, which is the measure of having trained the mind. So basically, how do you know when the mind training practice is working? Okay, what's the measure of it? Yeah, and people often ask this. You said one of the inmates asked you, how do I know that my practice is getting somewhere if I don't have a teacher around? Yeah, to ask. Okay, so this has some of the instructions in it on how to evaluate or how to measure if our practice is going, our practice of thought training in particular, if it's going well. Okay, so the text says integrate all the teachings into one thought. Yeah? So that's the root line in the 7-point. And now the explanation. Since all the Buddha's teachings and the commentaries to them were meant to subdue the misconception or the grasping at self, and since that is the conception or the grasping that is to be eradicated or exhausted, we should examine whether the activities of our body, speech, and mind favor and encourage the grasping at self or oppose it. Okay? So the first thing to evaluate is our actions of body, speech, and mind. Do they encourage self-grasping, or are they opposed to self-grasping? Okay? So to do a little bit of introspection here. Yeah? What's going on in my mind? What kind of thoughts are there? Am I having more thoughts that are based on self-grasping now, or am I having more thoughts that are reducing the self-grasping? What about my speech? Is my speech coming from self-grasping? I need to, make myself look good or protect myself, so I use my speech in that way. Or is my speech coming from less self-grasping? What about how I'm acting? My physical actions, are they coming from self-grasping? Am I acting in crazy ways or physically damaging others or, putting myself out there for everybody to look at? Yeah, or am I reducing my self-grasping? So this is one way to see whether our practice of thought training is making, bearing some fruit. Okay? Is our self-grasping increasing or decreasing? Okay? And so similarly, is our self-centeredness increasing or decreasing? Now, sometimes it may appear that our self-centeredness is increasing. Yeah, and you're going, I used to be much less selfish before, and now it's just every thought is self-centered here. This is awful. But sometimes it's the thing that we were actually just as self-centered before, we didn't notice it. Only now we're noticing it. It's kind of like the person who lives by the highway doesn't notice the sounds of the car, but if they go away for holiday, when they come back, it's like, boy, it's really noisy here. So same with us. We may not notice the constant din of self-centered thoughts until we begin to practice the Dharma. Yeah, but to really evaluate, is my self-centeredness increasing or decreasing? Yeah, how are my actions during the day? Am I really looking out for what I want, what I need, what I think is best, so that my idea is accepted and I get what I want and people understand me and people think well of me and, all this stuff? Or is my mind thinking more of how can I benefit others, having a sympathetic heart towards others, looking around how I can help, being mindful of whether we're keeping our mind in the Dharma and doing our practice, and so really evaluating, what's going on in my mind. When I have the chance to practice Dharma, am I just going, oh God, I want to go back to sleep, or this practice isn't working, or, are we thinking like that, or are we, kind of making some effort and trying to work with this monkey mind? So that's a real good way to see. Now, of course, we shouldn't judge ourselves really stringently. We shouldn't, just because we have a lot of self-centered thoughts, say, well, my whole practice is going rotten, I'm not getting anywhere. Yeah, because that's not true. Yeah, it's getting somewhere. Maybe not as quickly as we want it, but we have to let go of our wish for it all to happen quickly. And, and if we're making progress, then to be content with that and encourage ourselves. Yeah. But if we see that we're getting more egotistical, even maybe using the Dharma to increase our ego, kind of look at me, I've done so many retreats, I know such and such high lama, I've studied this and that, if we find that this kind of stuff is going on in our, you should treat me this way, don't you know? I'm a great practitioner, you should treat me this way, and why are you treating me so disrespectfully? So if that kind of thought is going in our mind, then we know that, that, we need to do some correction here. There's a fire in the house. We need to put it out. Yeah. Okay. So we should examine whether the activities of our body, speech, and mind favor and encourage grasping itself or oppose it. If we find that they favor it, then we have missed the point of hearing, contemplating, and meditating on the Dharma. Okay? So if our body, speech, and mind are just going in the direction of self-centeredness and self-grasping ignorance, we've missed the point. If, however, they oppose it, that is a sign of a successful practice of the Dharma and that we have engaged in authentic mind training. And so to look and, sometimes we can really see, this situation, usually I would act this way, this time somehow I'm not. Or, I caught my mind about ready to go out on the deep end, after an object of attachment, and I pulled it back. So to be able to look and evaluate and congratulate ourselves, okay, when we do well. This is the scale against which the practitioner should be weighed. We should ensure that we are not disappointed when subject to such assessment. Okay? So when we assess our own body, speech, and mind, we should practice well beforehand so that when we assess it, we don't go, my mind's crazy. Okay, then the text says, and here's another line from the 7-point thought training, primary importance should be given to the two witnesses. Okay, so there's two primary witnesses, the inner witness and the outer witness. Okay, the text says, other people may also serve as witnesses, commenting that you are engaging in proper practice and that your mind has become smooth and cool, but this is of no help. Okay, so the outer witness is the feedback from other people. And it is of help in the sense that sometimes we judge ourselves too harshly, or we don't have a good picture on ourselves, and so other people giving us some feedback can be very encouraging. So it's not of totally no use, because sometimes people who know us very well, they'll remark on the change. And they'll say, you know, I've known you for a long time. You used to get really angry about this, and you don't get angry about that anymore. Or you used to be, you know, have your nose stuck in the air so much, and now you're not haughty. You're very, you know, you're very humble. And so this kind of feedback from friends and family can be useful. Yeah, but again, it is filtered through often their expectations of us and other things. And the reason our author says it's of no help is because if we just take that as like praise and go, oh, well, yeah, my practice is going really well. Everybody thinks I'm not as selfish as I used to be. And then we get a little bit complacent. Then that's not so good. Or we get a little bit arrogant. Oh, my practice is going really well. So-and-so noticed how I'm, you know, not so egotistical. You know? I'm so happy. I hope the whole world sees that I'm not as selfish as I used to be. I hope everybody likes me more now. And that they praise me because I'm not as selfish as I used to be. Okay? So, that kind of nutty way of thinking. Okay, the vitally important thing is that when we examine ourselves under any circumstances, we should see that we are not deceiving, fooling, or embarrassing ourselves. Okay, so not deceiving, fooling, or embarrassing ourselves. We deceive ourselves a lot, don't we? Yeah, sometimes by just thinking we're better than we are, thinking we're worse than we are. When we have a good intention, we doubt our good intention. When we have a bad intention, we don't even notice it. Yeah, so lots of times we're really not in such good touch with what's going on in our own heart and mind. Yeah, so there could be a lot of self-deception, not even intentional there. Not at all intentional. It's like we're really trying to be clear, but we're out to lunch. Yeah, we don't see these things in ourselves. Of course, other people see them very clearly, and we tell them they're wrong. Yeah. But we're just not ready at that point to be able to see those aspects of ourselves. And so it takes us some time, you know. Okay, so, but it is important that when we examine ourselves under any circumstances, we should see that we are not deceiving, fooling, or embarrassing ourselves. So as much as possible to try and be honest with ourselves. You know, and even if we can't completely counteract some bad habit we have, at least let's admit it's a bad habit. Okay? Instead of like making all these reasons why it's actually a good habit, you know, let's just acknowledge it's a bad habit. But my mind's overpowered by delusion right now, and I can't work with it as much as I would like to be. Okay, just so that we have some kind of honesty there. If we have trained our minds with regard to the most unpleasant worldly phenomena and achieve what we desire, this shows that we have trained our minds. So if we are able to deal with unpleasant worldly things, yeah, and have attained a state of mind that is peaceful, that we desire, then it shows that we're making progress. Okay. The one thing here is that, you know, when we're talking about this, the inner witness. Oh, I wrote it here. Okay, the inner witness. Okay, the external witness is our friends and relatives. The inner witness is the guru who embodies the three jewels, who is inseparable from the ultimate nature of our mind. So this is the guru deity yoga I was just talking about. And so if our motivation is pure, then there's no reason to feel ashamed before our own inner guru, our own inner witness. But if we're insincere, and then we'll be very afraid that our friends and relatives will see through our big facade. Okay, so if we're sincere and have a sincere motivation, we won't, you know, feel ashamed when we look at ourselves. Okay, and not just that, but we'll be able to evaluate ourselves correctly. Because sometimes we evaluate ourselves incorrectly and we shame ourselves. Okay? And we think, oh, this is my inner witness. But actually we're exaggerating how negative some part of ourself is. Okay, so that's also a kind of self-deception too. Or when we're shaming ourselves. But if we have a sincere motivation, then our heart's at peace. Yeah. Whereas when we have an insincere motivation, then we're always kind of doing this dance so that other people don't see through our facade and see what's really there. We keep trying to, you know the dance we do. Yeah, we do this nice dance so that we always kind of look good, and we always stay below the radar. Yeah, we do as much as we can to get our way, and we can even be a little bit rebellious, but we make sure we stay under the radar. Okay? Or if somebody calls us, we have a whole list of reasons and excuses why they misapprehended it. Okay, you know that? Yeah? So this kind of insincere motivation, that sometimes it's very hard for us to admit to. Yeah, because we have a lot invested on keeping this facade up. So that nobody challenges who we are and nobody calls us on our faults. Because we don't like anybody to call us on our faults, do we? Yeah. So we do this dance and we construct our little smoke and mirrors and different things and stay below the radar. We go right up to exactly where the radar. What can I get away with here without somebody really seeing how selfish I'm being? Yeah. Or what can I deny here without and have a lot of good reasons for it without somebody being able to call me on it? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. How much can I throw shit in somebody else's face and get away with it without them having a good reason to say, look what you're doing? Yeah, because we do that, but we have all these reasons and this and that and the other thing, don't we? Yeah? So that even somebody tries to say, look what you're doing. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. This. You misunderstood me. So it takes a lot of courage to be really honest with ourselves, a lot of gentleness, compassion with ourselves, a lot of truthfulness. And it's something we have to grow into. It's not going to come all at once. Yeah? Because lots of times the smoke and mirrors, we've been practicing them for eons. We're professional sleight of hand things, yeah. Oh no, there's no ace of spades here. Okay, good. So we're over time. We'll have to stop now.